Good evening, everyone. Hello. Here in person. Hello, here in person.
Hello.
Good evening. Hello, everyone that is watching us online on our Facebook page, on our YouTube page, and our Instagram as well. Um, Great to have you all here in this weekly study group on the 13th of March. Um, Not 13th of March, 13th of April.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's April. Somebody put wrong in our slide there. 13th of April. So let's change that. Let's change to the right. Okay, so weekly study group on Wednesdays. Welcome everyone. Can't believe we're already halfway through April.
Yeah.
And as we've been talking about the last couple of weeks, International Spiritist Council, among other Spiritist institutions, they are promoting Spiritism in the month that Spiritism came to humanity with the publishing of the Spirit's book. So um, we have, and on our YouTube, many lectures and many talks. Actually, they're not lectures; they're like short talks, about 5 to 10, 15 minutes, um, and all the different countries around the world, many languages. So it'll be a great opportunity to participate, great opportunity to spread the word as well. Very interesting topics, very current topics that anyone that has heard, follows Spiritism or not, can follow through. So just have a look in our pages, especially on our Facebook and our YouTube, and there is a playlist on our channel, first World Spiritist Month. And our first participation will be tomorrow 8 p.m. It'll be, we helped with a talk about extremism and Spiritism. So you can watch that. New Zealand participating on this very special occasion. So yeah, stay tuned and watch, like, subscribe, hit the bell, and all of the jargon that people use. And I think for news, I think that's pretty much it. We are doing our study group following um, the usual order. We are doing our inspirational reading from the Living Spring by Emmanuel, um, written by the mediumship of Francisco Camilo Xavier, and we are on item 9, and we can follow the reading through. If you have any issues or any questions, as always, you can leave a comment, and we can put it in this live as well.
Living Spring, item 9. Let us be content. But if we have food and clothing, let us be content with it. Paul 1
Timothy.
Timothy. Holders of wheat will furnish their table with but a few slices of bread should satisfy their hunger. Owners of textile factories will spare only a few square yards of fabric to make clothing for themselves. No one should feed or clothe themselves based on gluttony or vanity, but on the principles that govern life on its natural foundations. Why do you have to wait for a banquet to offer a few leftovers to those who are hungry? Why do you have to have a large sum of money first before assisting someone in want? Charity does not depend on one's wallet or purse. Its source is found in the heart. The desire to have enough money to help one's neighbor or oneself in time of uncertainty and insecurity is always praiseworthy. However, limiting one's practice of the good to a full cover in is deplorable. Therefore, open the doors of your soul and allow your sentiment to shine on everyone, just like the sun, whose rays illuminate, comfort, nurture, and warm. The rain falls as mere drops, but it fertilizes the soil and sustains billions of lives. Let us share what little we may have and amplify by love. With time, it will turn into widespread prosperity. If properly cared for, a few seeds may increase to eventually cover a huge field. Thus, let us be joyful and help all those who are part of our journey. Because, according to the wise words of the apostle, if we have the blessings of a daily bread and clothing, we are live and serve in peace and contentment.
Dear God, lovely Master Jesus, we'd like to thank you for this opportunity to be here, united, to learn a little bit more. We'd like to ask permission to start one more meeting of the Allan Kardec Spiritist group, and we'd like to open up our hearts, elevate our thoughts, connect with the superior spirits so we can receive inspiration and be able to teach with everything that we know and everything from the spirits as well. We'd like once more to thank our protected spirits that help us on a daily basis. We'd like to ask that we can have a great meeting today. So be it.
Thank you. So needs to move the camera a little bit away because it's cropping a little bit of the. Okay. So we have our study group of the Gospel according to Spiritism. We finished a chapter last week. It's a very short chapter.
Yes.
We smashed it in one day, in 1 week. Just a little bit of a summary, maybe, of last week's chapter, which was chapter 22. Coming back from that one, which is do not separate what God has joined together, which was about divorce, marriage, celibacy. Yeah. And what was the kind of a overview of what we studied? I wasn't here. I was kind of half following in bed last week. But
Yeah, I can summarize a little bit. So it was about, like you're saying, marriage and divorce, and more about divorce and the way we see marriage and the union about with like two souls. Kind of this concept evolves with time. So back then they said that because of the harsh of the human hearts, they said, Moses said that, okay, you can have a divorce, but Jesus was telling that this is because we are not ready to be in a union committed from the beginning. And that's why back then they said, okay, you can have a divorce. And nowadays the divorce just means something that's already broken. So it's not the divorce that's going to be against the laws of God, but something already broken, and the divorce is just to formalize that, so you don't lose the rest of your reincarnation. So you can go to one side, and your partner can go to the other side, and can still use the opportunity to be alive, to learn and to grow, and not be stuck on that relationship that's not going anywhere. And then we talk about a little bit of the things that people look on those relationships that doesn't work. So sometimes it's material stuff, sometimes it's just the looks of a person, and then with time that looks goes away. And then
It changes a little bit.
else to make that union strong. And then at the end, when you said that something that's really good, that nowadays it doesn't need to be a marriage anymore. Here, for example, in New Zealand, they accept the
De facto.
yeah, so it's just like a stable partnership.
Yeah.
Partner, I forgot the way that they use, but it doesn't need to be.
Even to apply for a visa.
Yeah.
or have your rights as a partner. You don't have to be married. You only have to be living together. So yeah. Well, that's civil union is something formalized, but even if you live together and have a joint account and all that, you can be considered as a de facto relationship. De facto relationship. The civil unions you have to go and sign and yeah, and it's interesting. I was going to make a comment last week. I was at home, but there is a book by Martin Spiralva where he is like a study. It's funny because the book is studying another book. It's a study of, the book is called Estudando a Mediunidade. So we study mediumship, where Martin Spiralva studied the book Nos Domínios da Mediunidade, on the domains of mediumship. And there's one chapter that he explains the different categories of marriage from a spiritual point of view. There are some marriages that are accidental, people that meet and for X reasons, physical attraction, they get together, but they're not really, they are like an accident. They just by chance, they start having a relationship. There's 5 different types from this one, which is, I should have memorized that before I talk about it. But there's 5 of them. One which is more like a sacrificial one, where a spirit is more involved than the other one, and they make a sacrifice to be able to help them grow. There's one which is the 2 are the same level of evolution, and they in the spiritual world they decide to get together towards a goal, So when I find it, I'll post it on our Facebook page. People can read. It's really interesting to see that. But the bottom line is correct. Like if it's not meant to be, if it's not bonded by love, which is pretty much what God is love, then it's going to be dissolved. Got it. Right?
So you said accidental, probational,
yeah.
Sacrificial, and then transcendent.
Transcendental.
And almas afins, like not soulmates, but
souls alike.
yeah,
Souls
alike.
souls that are alike, that they have a goal, and it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
So, and it's interesting because it was a great summarizing of last week. Thank you. Anybody else would like to chip in? No? Okay. Because this week we keep talking about family. We talked about marriage, but most importantly divorce. And here we talk about strange morals and father, mother, children, siblings. So who would like to start reading the?
I think
Cool. Thank you.
She's
So chapter 23.
strange morals. Whoever does not hate his father and mother. A large crowd of people was walking with Jesus when he turned to them and said, if anyone comes
I just wanted to read that.
Okay, sorry.
The subtitles. Yeah.
Whoever does not hate his father and mother, forsaking father, mother, and children, leave to the dead the care of burying their dead. I have not come to bring peace, but division.
So why do you think Kardec being the great professor that he was, why did he choose the title of the chapter to be Strange Morals? It's very strange. I mean, I've seen Stranger Things on Netflix, but
That's definitely strange.
that's definitely strange. But why is it Strange Morals? Why was there a need to title that Strange Moral? What's the strange about just these subtitles? Anybody want to start a conversation?
Because there are things that are common on Kardec's time, but I think nowadays it's still common. A lot of those, like, how can I say, a lot of those way of thinking. Because, for example, the first one, every time that you're talking with like a colleague, they say, oh, but my father does that, and I don't live with him, I don't like to talk to him, and that is like that kind of like not good relationship.
Mhm.
And then it kind of everyone saying the same thing. It seems that's something that's normal, and then that's become that's normal. So that's why I believe that it became that everyone does that, but it's like something strange. So that's it's not the normal moral. For example, that he was Jesus teacher in when he was here, and then I think he put that it's something that it's common, but it's not correct. So they put on this strange moral category.
Mhm.
I would say he compiled some messages that can be misread
Mhm.
due to the translation from the Hebrew, which can definitely mislead something like "Go hate your mother and your father."
Yeah,
So I think he put those
and
phrases.
forsaking, abandon,
Yeah.
abandon your father, your mother, and your children. Like, how can
Yeah.
I abandon?
And I think he's gonna talk a little bit deep into it, like what the actual translation of hate means, which we're gonna find out very soon. It's just not love as much as something, or even at the end of the chapter, I know they have a Hebrew mention. They say the word, for example, camel. The camel, the animal,
Yeah.
is the same word as rope.
Spoiler alert!
Yeah.
Spoiler alert!
So that's why it's strange because it's something that
Yeah, it
needs
is.
interpretation.
Yeah. And it's interesting because some of the ideas and some of the lessons that we read in the gospel, and therefore by default in the gospel according to Spiritism, they are parables and they are open for interpretation and they are taken from a different historical context. In this case, they are not necessarily parables, they're more direct teaching, but as Togun was saying, it's being busy interpreted by the language translation and by the fact that Jesus did not write this. It was written by somebody else's perspective. So there's a lot of things in this, but also in the whole New Testament, and in the Old Testament even more, that if you translate literally, they are barbaric.
Yeah.
So you need to try to understand them from a different point of view. And that's why Spiritism brings us these new concepts, ideas, and paradigms so we can try to understand them better, because Spiritism is a rationalized faith, so we need to understand it to be the order to put into practice. So I think it's quite interesting that he put strange morals, and we're going to see why is it strange. Because always, whenever I was growing up and learning this, there's a very strange name for a chapter, because everything is more like straightforward, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, love your enemies, honor your father and your mother. They're all pretty, but strange morals, like it's weird, but we're going to find out more and when we start reading. Whoever does not hate his father and mother.
A large crowd of people was walking with Jesus when he turned to them and said, "If anyone comes to me but does not hate his father and mother, his wife and children, his brothers and sisters, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. And anyone who does not want to take up his cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Therefore, anyone among you who does not renounce everything he has cannot be my disciple. He who loves his father and mother more than me is not worthy of me. He who loves his son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me."
So if you just take literally, that's very strange for Jesus to be saying this, right?
It's interesting to reflect on that. That view that people have that Jesus or God being extremely severe in punishing people and having that hate of, oh, you're gonna burn. Sometimes I imagine that people probably didn't interpret that really well. They just read it and they thought they were like that.
But I think it's also so much to do with the way when Jesus arrived, the message was so foreign for people, and they were used to the person before Jesus giving the orders, right, in a certain way. It was Moses, who was really straightforward and quite bossy because he had to, because that's what they needed at the time. So the type of commandment that they needed was what he needed to do. And then I feel that the interpretation that people did when writing the Bible, it has a lot of that feeling that this is how leaders behave. This is how you expect people to tell you how to do things.
It's my way or the highway.
Yeah, exactly. So it's an eye for an eye, you know. So it's, and that's the difficulty on respecting Jesus, on seeing him as a leader, and then when putting his thoughts into paper, writing it down the way the person that wrote see it, right? So instead of a suggestion like, oh, we all should love each other, because it's the right thing to do. It's not, you must love it.
Yeah.
This is how it is, and why? Because I said so. So I think it's just lots of history, right, on the way they interpret it. Right?
It's more how Matthew and how Luke heard it than how Jesus said it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, you know, from 3 onwards, we're going to start to see that amongst other reasons why these are strange morals.
Although very rare, certain words spoken by Christ make such a strange contrast that one instinctively rejects their literal meaning, and the sublimity of his doctrine does not suffer any harm because of it. Written after his death, none of the Gospels were written during his lifetime. One may be led to believe that in this case, the depth of his thoughts, was not well expressed, or, what is no less probable, the original meaning may have suffered an alteration in passing from one language to another. It is enough for an error to be committed just once, for it to be repeated in subsequent copies, as it seems so often regarding historical facts. The word hate in this verse from Luke, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, in such a case, no one would even think of attributing it to Jesus, so it would be pointless to argue about it, and even less to seek to justify it. One would first have to know if he did in fact state it, and if so, one would have to determine if, in the language in which he expressed himself, this word has the same meaning as it in ours. In this verse from John, he who hates his life in this world will save it for eternal life. It is certain that it does not express the ideal attached to it. The Hebrew language was not rich and contained many words with several connotations. One example of this is the word in Genesis that designates the phases of creation, and which also serve to express a given period of time and the diurnal rotation. Hence, its later translation using the word day and the belief that the world have been the work of 6 times 24 hours. The same applies to the word that meant either camel or rope. Ropes were made from camel hair, and which was translated as camel in the allegory of the eye of a needle. Moreover, one must take.
Can we read that part?
Sorry, that's the footnote. Number 1 goes to the end of the chapter.
It's an end of that.
Yeah. No object in Latin, kai or midei in Greek, does not mean to hate, but to love less. What the Greek verb misein expresses, the Hebrew verb that Jesus must have used expresses even better. It not only means to hate, but to love less, not to love as much as, or not to love the same as another. In the Syriac dialect, a dialect of Aramaic, the mother tongue of Jesus, which Jesus probably used more frequently, this is accented even more. It is in this sense that it is stated in Genesis 29:30-31, and Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah, and Yahweh, seeing that Leah was hated. It is obvious that the true meaning here is love less, and that is how it should be translated. In many other Hebraic passages, and especially in Syriac ones, the same verb is employed in the sense of not to love as much as another, and it would be a misinterpretation to translate it as to hate, which has another well-defined meaning. Furthermore, the text from Matthew clears up all difficulty. Emphasizing.
Exactly. Mhm. This note was inserted by Kardec. So just by that little footnote, we can understand
Yeah.
a lot, right? Anybody like to make a comment on on that information?
We know that we had a lot of misinterpretation of the original. So there are some people back in Brazil that we know that they go and they study right just to understand like the original one, so then they can understand and explain in a better way. We know someone that does that. I forgot the name. We were studying in our meeting with
Oh,
Camila.
right.
And
Yeah, we were studying a series of lectures from Haroldo
I don't
Dutra
know what it is, yeah.
that covers the first book of the Old Testament, the Genesis, and then the next one, Exodus, and then there is another one. So it covers the three first books of the Old Testament, and it goes back to the first copies of the original Aramaic, the way that they wrote back then, and they bring that knowledge, the the context as well, why they was written that way, the way that they used to learn or to read, because it's kind of like a song, so they used to repeat all the time, and it's kind of a melodic and things like that. That's why some words were chosen to be on that context as
Because they
well.
suited better the melody.
Yeah.
They use the poetic license.
Yeah, and that was the context of the Old Testament, and it was really interesting to see that it's like a long series. It's like each one of those books has more than 20 lectures, so it's like it's a lot. We studied for like 6 months. We didn't even finish the first book.
Just a little footnote on that, not going too far away from the topic, but something similar happened to the codification. The Genesis, when it was first published, it went through many alterations, but just recently, if you go through the family library, you can see that the Genesis has been revised from the original because there has been some alterations that were done in some past publications. So something like that happened in Spiritism, which is much less, it's only, I can't remember the Genesis, the Spirit's book was 57, so it would have been 69, I don't know, 69 or 60, or anyway, not so long as the Bible. So yeah, it's a big work to do that because from the Aramaic went to Assyriac to Aramaic to Greek to Latin to, of course, Hebrew as well, and all these other languages. So, do you want to say something about how we?
No, it's just that when you're talking about the Genesis, and I was going to say that you can see usually when you buy a new edition, is written how many times it's been revised, or if the new printout has a revision, because then if you can swap it if you want, right? You can just buy a new one because it has a revision or something that the previous one doesn't. So usually that's what the books have written. And interesting enough, the Bible doesn't have that. So you don't have a chance to know how many times it's been rewritten and revised and changed, because obviously you have there is no control of it. So we don't know who translated it first, or in how many languages, how much the story changed, and if we stop to think about it, just to correct someone's, if you ever translated anything, or if you worked with just correcting correcting grammatics, it's simple things like that. it's really hard not to put your words on someone's mouth, you know? It's really hard to edit the small mistakes that the person did, maybe swap an I to a Z, or maybe wrote the sentence when it's supposed to be past and is written in the present, and not to be like, oh, but you know, it sounds better like this, and go and edit everything, and in the end, the text sounds like it was you who wrote it. It doesn't sound like money anymore. So it's a really, really hard job to actually translate things the way they were meant to be said, or correct things and keep the essence of it, because it's really easy to turn the text into your text.
version,
Yeah, into your version. So I imagine that every time it got translated, it got a lot of the person that was translated. And if the person interpret, because it was really open to it is really open to interpretation. Easily, someone could understand in a certain way, and oh, strange means weird, right? So this is what this chapter is, and change the words in that sense when translating is not that easy of a job, as the footnote says, you know. It comes from Hebrew, but we just used to speak Aramaic, so in this sense, this context makes way more sense than the other one. So it's a historic translation. It's really complicated. It's like restoration of paintings, you know. You need to study years to actually understand where those people were coming from, what emotion they were trying to pass, what were the colors and products available, and it's really complicated. So I think that's where our rationalized faith needs to come through, you know. If you read and it doesn't make sense, we need to research it to understand that.
Cool. Wanna say anything?
I think you guys did a lot already. It's interesting to think about the person who first translates something and probably think, oh, but like this is just a one word, it would not make any difference. And then 200 years after, has passed through so many other people with different mentalities. People are probably having a bad day and you not give them much, and then we end up with different translations. Another word that was interesting that I was reading that often it was mistranslated in the Bible was the spirit, the word spirit, and they usually translate for Holy Spirit, and sometimes it only means spirit, does not mean Holy Spirit, pointing to the Spirit itself. That you know, yeah.
I mean, I think we can all relate, being a non-native English speaker with a lot of translations. When we try to say something or we read something, we understand it in one way, and then it actually means something completely different. And yeah, I remember, I mean, all these years ago coming to New Zealand and hearing something, understanding something, but was something completely different from what I read or what I heard, or you know, just the idea of learning. So yeah, language is a very complicated thing. It's a very fluid thing as well. And I think the most interesting thing that we're going to touch on it is that if you see that the word kai or audit, non-audit, or kai or nisei does not mean hate, but to love less. Because if you attribute Jesus saying to hate your father, your mother, that's strange. Because the foundation of all the teachings, just like Jesus said, the greatest commandment is to love God above all and your neighbor as yourself. So all the teachings are based on the greatest commandment. So that goes against that. So how could it make sense? But if you change hate for to love less, or to not to love as much, or not to love the same as, is different. So we're going to be seeing. Suddenly it makes a lot of sense. It's not so strange anymore. Yeah. So that's what we have to go back to. The whole teachings of Jesus, which is the teaching of love, is based on the greatest commandment. And now it makes a little bit more sense. And now we're going to see more about the context in which that was read. Moreover, would you like to continue reading? Or
Yeah, I think it's.
Thank you, Mama.
Moreover, one must take into account the customs and character of peoples, which influence the particular meaning of the languages. Without this understanding, the true meaning of certain words is lost. From one language to another, the same term can assume different degrees of strength. It might be an insult or a blasphemy in one language, but is significant in another, depending on the idea attributed to it. Even in the same language, certain words lose their significance over time. This is why a strictly literal translation does not always express a thought precisely, and in order to be exact, one must sometimes use equivalents or paraphrases rather than cognate. These remarks find a special application in the interpretation of the Holy Scriptures and the Gospels in particular. If one does not take into account the environment in which Jesus lived, one is exposed to errors regarding the significance of certain expressions and certain events due to the habit of comparing others to oneself. Therefore, one must read the term hate of its modern acceptation as contrary to the spirit of Jesus' teaching.
Okay. So yeah, it's also tell us to see also chapter 14, number 5, and chapter 14, which is not long ago. We are in chapter 23, so 9 chapters ago, which is honor your father and your mother. So how come in one chapter he was telling us to honor our father and your mother, and now he's telling us to hate the father and the mother and leave the father, abandon or forsake the father and the mother, and in order to follow him. So it doesn't make that much sense.
Bipolar Jesus.
That couldn't be that couldn't be possible, right? And it's interesting. Just bring back one. Oh, sorry. Bring back one. When he says that. No, from one language to another. No, even in the same language, certain words lose their significance over time. For example, we talked about the Genesis. He talks about it a bit earlier. In the Hebrew, the same word, which is yom, Y-O-M, means day, a period of time, a cycle. There are many different translations, and they chose the word day. So, according to the Bible, the world was created in 6 days. In the seventh day, God rested. But we know that it's not days; it's cycles, 6 different cycles, which is more in accordance to what science is showing us, all the different periods of creation and regeneration of the planet, which is also explained in more details in the Genesis, the book in the codification. So one same word meaning different things, and it can have changed the total. We have that in Portuguese, a manga, a fruta, and manga, the camisa. They're two different things. Or I can't think of anything in English at the moment.
Fine, the word fine.
Yeah.
Could be a fine, police give it to
Fine.
you. Could be a pen that has a fine point. Could be I'm fine.
Yeah, it could be a fine day, fine dining. Yeah.
So many things, but one really interesting place, the museum world in São Paulo, Museu da Palavra.
Yeah.
It's there is obviously super interesting. Like, everything that is there is really nice, but there is one part of the expo that talks about the word cycle, like how all the words in the Portuguese in the way that we know now, how much it changed and how it has a cycle, and in those cycles, lots of words lose their meaning, not just because that thing doesn't exist anymore because we moved from it. Like he was talking, for example, the word vitória in Portuguese, which in English would be victory. It's a carriage, like a really antique, classic carriage that would be used with horses, pulled by horses. So then the word doesn't have that meaning anymore, and it turned into disuse, and it turned into something else. So it talks about the cycle of the word, like it talks about so how long he lives in our actual language being repeated and people understanding straight away what is that. And for some words, like some words in our national anthem, were at some point actually made sense, and now lots of it to us is gibberish because we really have no idea what is that. So it's quite interesting to know that it's a pattern that keeps repeating itself on the course of the, and obviously other languages are older than Portuguese, so you can see that better, like Latin, that falls into this use, but a whole language to fall in this use. And wouldn't that happen to words? Of course it would.
When a word or phrase has several meanings, we can describe that word in English as polysemous.
Poly?
Isn't it? Polysemous.
Polysemous.
Yes, that's what it's called, yeah. Because I remember studying that on Edge before I found that word, at the very beginning.
Yeah, poly is many, it's
Semous
semous
is
meaning. Yeah.
Several.
That's what it's called, yeah. Which you obviously find a lot. Languages
I mean, I can relate to that. Once again, not talking literally about spiritism, but talking about languages. Sometimes I'm talking to my friends, like back in Brazil, which I haven't seen. I mean, I've seen them. I haven't lived with them for like 28 years or 25 years. And I say a slang, they go, oh, I haven't heard that in so long because I don't speak Portuguese in the same way that, in a daily basis, and I don't follow the language. So, and the language has changed. So, I think we have a mission today, which is to finish the Chapter VIII
Ecstasy.
on the Spirit book. So I think we leave to that. We didn't go a lot into details, but I think anybody would like to say, like, just kind of summarize what we talked about it in this part?
Interpretation.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to summarize. It's all about interpretation, isn't it?
Yeah.
Different points of view, read as much as possible to try and understand.
Do not hate your parents.
And to try and understand where it's coming from, to make that the message makes sense where it came from, and that it makes sense to you also when you're reading. Don't accept everything the way that it's written. We need to learn. And this is something really important in any language. So when you're learning how to read, you're not just learning how to pronounce the words, but you're also learning how to interpret, right? To actually observe the meaning of it, to actually think about it. And this is so many people go through life being, how do you say that in English? Analphabet funcional, right? It's when you read things and you actually don't understand. You can interpret, you can understand the meaning, you cannot observe that. You just read it, but when you need to explain, you don't know what you just read. So obviously this is a really early stages, but I feel like lots of times when we are reading something that we just take it in, we are just one step above that, which is taking it in the way that is in there in the page, instead of actually trying to understand, take a step forward, take a degree above on trying to see the meaning behind that, or is actually what the person writing meant, or this is an allegory for something, or where is it coming from, what is written before, what is written after, take the whole meaning. So.
I'm thinking about the functional illiterate.
Literate, yeah, that's what it says. I think it does make sense, but
It does, yeah.
we just can say literate. It's kind of
Yeah, it's that is one of the reasons why Kardec told us, that Spiritism is based on rationalized faith, and to rationalize something is to understand it, and to understand we need to dig in and dig deep into what we are studying, and not just and read things through and accept them as they are. You just have to question, to be able to understand, and then because you're only able to apply them only once you understand them. And yeah, but I think for me, what I got from this first passage is that it's to be able to read all the messages and the teachings by Jesus is to to have that strong foundation that everything that is taught by the Christian morals, it's something that comes from love. And anything else that comes around that, disguised as something else, is not followed by the true, the true value, the core value, and the core principle that Jesus came to show us, which is love, and in the many forms that we have, many levels, not forms, but many levels of us understanding it. So anything that is a little bit strange, we have to question. So what's the context? Where is it? So what's the source of it? Anybody else would like to chip in, or shall we go to the Spirit's book? We can. All right, so we are almost there. We have a few slides to go through. We are on ecstasy. So we are still on somnambulism, ecstasy, emancipation of the soul. This is the name of the chapter. But this part is about is a summary of the ecstasy, second side in somnambulism here. So who can start reading this mouthful chapter?
So,
Thank you.
ecstasy is the state in which the interdependence between the soul and body is expressed in the most sensitive way, and even becomes somewhat palpable. In both dreams and somnambulism, the soul wanders through terrestrial worlds, whereas in ecstasy, it enters an unknown world, that of ethereal spirits, with whom it communicates, without, however, overstepping certain bounds. If it did, the soul would completely break the ties connecting it to the body. A resplendent and entirely new brilliance surrounds the soul. Harmonies unknown on earth enrapture it. An indefinable well-being permeates it. The spirit enjoys a foretaste of celestial beatitude, and it may be said that it has set one foot on the threshold of eternity.
Wow, that sounds so beautiful. Yeah, but I think just it's interesting that he says, that without overstepping certain bounds, because if he did, if the soul overstepped these certain bounds, the soul would completely break the ties connected to the body, so we could actually die.
No way back.
No way back, yeah. I mean, the the connection, not the soul dies, but the body dies, of course. Oops, the other way.
Should I keep going?
Yes.
In the state of ecstasy, the nullification of the body is almost complete. It only maintains organic life per se, and it feels that the soul is connected to it by only a single thread, which with any further effort would break forever. In this state, all earthly thoughts disappear in order to give way to the pure sentiment that is the very essence of our immaterial being. Entirely enraptured by the sublime contemplation, ecstatics regard life as momentary pause. For them, good and evil, and the crude joys and hardships of this world are no more than the futile incidents of a journey of which they feel happy to see the end. The same thing happens with ecstatics as with somnambulists. Their lucidity may be more purified or less so, and how fully they comprehend things depends on the degree to which their spirit has evolved. At times, there is more exaltation exaltation than true lucidity among ecstatics, or rather, their exaltation impairs their lucidity. The That is why their revelations are frequently a mixture of truths and errors, of sublime and absurd, even ridiculous things. Imperfect spirits often take advantage of this exaltation, always a source of frailty, frailty, in order to dominate the ecstatic who does not know how to master it. To do so, these spirits produce appearances that will keep the ecstatic attached to the ideas and prejudice of his or her working state.
Okay, so maybe we should take a break there. Any words?
I can read just one line.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
Finish this
Oh, yes, I can see that.
This is an obstacle, but not all cases are similar. It is our responsibility to coolly judge and weigh their revelations in the balance of reason.
Oh, yeah, because then it finishes the ecstasy. Anybody have any questions about any words, because once again, this is just the summarizing of Allan Kardec, it's not the spirits, it's just his observations of all the information that he gathered, is a summary from the spirits.
With this part here is really interesting because the questions that comes before that, it didn't show how deep the ecstasy goes. I thought that was like really similar with sonambulism, but it's way more deeper, and they have like more the spiritual world sensations and everything. They even forgot things from Earth because they are like really inside of everything. They can feel everything around it.
Yeah. And this is information from back when the Spirits book was written, because since then there has been many studies about artificial ways of acquiring that, that are, some of them like from decades, from centuries, from different practices, from ayahuasca, from Santo Daime, from other tribes, from the pre-Columban area in South America, where people use different ingredients to enhance their awareness and their level of to reach that ecstasy, that is being reproduced by drug and pharmaceuticals and the hallucinogens as well. And I mean, and we can nowadays we have even more resources to go into and study, if you like. And it's pretty much describing a trip. Somebody taking a hallucinogenous trip that it's quite interesting that he presents, just if you go back, to, the lucidity during that state of emancipation of the soul. The lucidity is more purified or less purified depending on how fully they comprehend things, and also how evolved they are in order to be able to be connected to that experience, I guess. And imperfect spirits take advantage of this exaltation to confuse people that are on that state. And I think it's quite fascinating to think that this was written all this time ago, and there still has, it has been a lot of study and further development on the study of these hallucinogens and anybody else want to?
Sorry, I was going to say that part is quite it's quite interesting about how, and we know that spirits, that the less evolved spirits will take advantage of every moment possible in our lives to have some fun or to make people confused, because it's just fun, or it's just how they spend their time. So many people think that ecstasy and it's a moment of revelation and they are seeing things.
Yeah,
and
it's an epiphany.
Exactly, that is expanding their mind, and we know that harming our body is never the right answer, right? We don't need any of that to actually be able to find an answer for something. We know that it's much more straightforward than that, but it's way harder. It's really hard work to be able to dive in yourself, to be able to, for example, some people compare to it's a high state of meditation, right?
Yeah.
Meditating is way harder than that, than
Yeah.
taking a synthetic drug and having a trip, right? When you truly meditate, it's a matter of I keep forgetting the words post-COVID, maybe like that. It's a matter of you have to be really diligent with your practice, with your studying. It's not really easy. You have to be able to listen to your sixth sense in a way, or to your to the spirits that are around you that are actually trying to help us. It's a matter of keeping our vibration high. It's a matter of clearing our mind, our thoughts. So this is much harder than
Yeah.
taking a drug.
And just like I said before, there is a risk of doing, especially if you're doing artificially, there is a risk of breaking the connection of your soul and your body, and then you're committing pretty much an overdose, which is a suicide, and there will be consequences. Even if that doesn't happen, there is a consequence, because every action, there is a reaction. And so for taking those substances, you might be doing something to your body that is not natural otherwise. So that would have a consequence from the physical side of it, but also coming from a spiritist point of view, you have a consequence on the spiritual side of things as well. What kind of spirits are you attracting to your daily life if you go to that path as well? So
It's interesting to use the word natural, and it is natural. The connection with the spirit is just part of our lives. There is not such a thing as supernatural, something that's beyond nature. And definitely using this kind of hallucinogens to actually harm your material self, to actually achieve some sort of connection that
is so temporary, so fast. Yeah.
it is obviously not as much sustainable way of using it, because to keep the connection you would have to use constantly, and obviously can end up causing a suicide. It's very interesting that they mentioned that the low vibration spirits or the less evolved spirits will connect with those people, because the intention of they go into this sort of experience is obviously to see something. So for a spirit that is just there to play with you, they know exactly what they have to do. Let me put some, rabbit flying on the magic unicorn,
Some gnomes.
and that's it. And now I can play with that person, and the person's gonna tell everyone that they saw this. I'm gonna have more people coming here and using these drugs. And it's a little chain reaction. So spirits who are less evolved, they very easily know what you want. They can easily just boost your ego or any of those emotions.
Just dangle the carrots in front of you.
And it's like if you receive a message from the spirit, and the message is, you are an amazing person, you're better than everybody else, and you're going to be rich. It's what the person wants you to hear. So that it's, when you go to the common sense, it's.
Yeah, and I think it's called ecstasy also for a reason, right? And we use the word for other purpose, but always with the connotation of pleasure, of what you feel. In that moment, I'm sure it feels really good, but like Mani was saying, it's momentaneous, and you have to deal with the consequences of it after. So keep trying to escape to that. Is escape. Life is happening while you are living that. So it's just stopping your evolution. It's keeping you stuck in a world that doesn't actually exist. While you are there experiencing this, actual experiences are happening around you, and you're just missing.
All right, we continue. Could you please continue reading for us?
Yes.
The Emancipation.
Thank you. The emancipation of the soul sometimes even manifests in the waking state and produces the phenomenon called second sight, which gives to those possessing it the faculty of seeing, hearing, and feeling beyond the limits of their normal senses. They perceive things at distance wherever their soul may extend its action, and they see, so to speak, through their ordinary sight as a type of mirage. At the moment in which the phenomenon of second sight is produced, the physical state is considerably modified. The eyes become somewhat hazy, looking without seeing, and the whole physiognomy reflects a type of exaltation. It is obvious that the organs of sight are not involved in this phenomenon, because the vision has been seen to persist even if the eye is shut. This faculty seems as natural as that of normal sight for those who possesses it. They consider it a normal attribute of their being, and it does not seem exceptional to them. Generally, forgetfulness follows this temporary lucidity, the remembrance of which becomes more and more vague, finally disappearing like a dream. The power of second sight ranges from a confused sensation to a clear and distinct perception of things present or absent. In its rudimentary state, it gives to some individuals tact, astuteness, and a kind of sureness in their actions, which may manifest itself as an ability to evaluate, on a first contact, another person's moral standing. When the second sight is more developed, it awakens presentiments, and when developed even further, it shows events that have already happened or that are in the process of happening. Naturally, sorry.
So that was just a
Oh,
little bit of a
yes.
summary about the second sight. Any comments, any questions about?
It sounds to me like something every mother has really well developed. I was really that and thinking, oh my God, this is my mom. But now that I'm thinking about it, most mothers, I think.
So now we know the mothers don't have eyes in the back of their head. They have second sight.
Exactly. With eyes closed, you can see everything, know everything that's happening, even know the future. Look at that.
I don't know if they see the future or if they make it happen after they say it. It's a course or it can be both ways.
Or never. I think that's and the ability to evaluate on the first contact another person's moral standing. I think it also it's what we were talking, or maybe it's in a few weeks when we were talking about mediumship and just that we all at some point started doubting ourselves and the thoughts that come into our mind. So, the second parts of this, the description of the second side, we can definitely relearn how to fine tune it, because we all have. I feel like we all have it. It's just different levels of it, and we, in different times of our lives, it's more or less pronounced. So it feels like the more connected to spirituality you are, the more probably living in that high vibration you are, the easier it is to be connected to that, the easier it is to actually listen to your to what we call our gut, to listen to our spiritual friends and guides trying to help. It's ever easier when we are on the correct vibration, right? So much of it, it's much easier to control or easier to perceive when we are in the correct state of mind.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that they're saying that, the fact of seeing, so it's not just sight, but it's seeing, hearing, and feeling beyond the limits of the normal senses. Perceiving things at a distance, whatever the soul may extend its action. So we see that it's an extension of the very spirit that is able to perceive things from a distance. So and depending on how attached you are to your material being or your body, the easier it's going to be for you to expand your very spirit and take your awareness with it as well, to be able to perceive what's happening around. Would you please keep
Is that
the last one?
Natural?
Natural, yeah, and artificial.
Natural and artificial sonambulism, ecstasy, and second sight are no more than variations.
Varieties.
I can't say that. hierarchies, or modifications of effect arising from the same cause. Like dreams, such phenomena belongs to the natural order, and that's why it have existed
Throughout.
time. History shows us that they have been known about and even exploited since remotest antiquity, and it then may be found the explanation of an infinite number of events that preconceived ideas have regarded as supernatural.
Yeah, so it's quite interesting how, I mean, it's very long, but it's quite interesting how Kardec summarized the whole different types of emancipation of the soul, because, like you said, it's being, it's being studied and exploited since the remotest antiquity, about dreams, about our perception, about our life beyond matter. Because when our soul goes, free itself from the matter, many things happen, and for for a long period of time, we're not able to understand it. But now we are able to understand more and more, coming from a spiritist point of view, from a spiritualist point of view, but more so with a spiritist point of view, that we are able to understand. And we finished. Yes. Just in time. Now we're going to go through a new chapter. I think in the next one, I don't have it here.
Like spirits in the corporeal world.
The influence of the spirits in the. So we're still in the same book or same part. The second part, which is the spirit life. Now we're going to see the interaction between the spirits, how the spirits interfere in our life, and that's when we're going to start to look a little bit more about mediumship, how the spirit world can interfere with us, with our inspirations, with our thoughts, and more directly through mediumship. Okay, so we have finished the study part of our session. Now we're going to. We don't have any comments. We had somebody left a like. We have people watching us on Instagram as well. So you guys can follow our irradiation or vibration or prayer state. And then finally we're going to go through the final prayer. So asking everyone to remain seated in a comfortable position. Just a moment where we need to focus in the task ahead, which is to offer our care, our fluids, our intention to help those who are in need. So after all these lessons, all the messages that we received, with the excitement in our hearts and in our mind, we try to calm them down a little bit by following the music and following my voice. We also try to focus in our breathing, try to slow it down, breathing slowly through the nose and breathing out. Also paying attention to our heart, feeling light, observing our thoughts as they arrive. We watch them pass by without judging, without holding to them. We just watch them go as the wind blows, as the waves in the sea. And we try to focus, fully being present in this moment, a moment that we gather with brothers and sisters in Christ, us here in the material realm, but also being in touch with our spiritual friends that are here inspiring us, protecting us, and directing this work of sending these vibrations to those who are in need. So let us imagine ourselves in a big circle, pulsing light, vibrating light, and sending these vibrations of peace in a moment when there's so much hatred, misunderstanding, violence, and intolerance in the form of wars. Most recently, and more in the mainstream, the war in Ukraine, the invasion of Ukraine by the Russians. But not forgetting about the many other wars happening around the world. These atrocities that are still happening one day will disappear as the planet evolves. But as brothers and sisters in Christ, we pray for peace, bringing them all the comforts that this shall pass. We also pray for those in power, making the decisions, that the superior spirits can help them make the right decisions, so we no longer see this happen when the time comes. We also pray for health in a moment of this pandemic that is still happening, is minimizing in some places, but it's still happening. And then for sure the consequences are still here with us. With many people still waiting for treatments, for many diseases, many ailments, waiting for a treatment, waiting for a cure. Let's pray that their hearts can be filled with hope, with resignation, and love. We also pray for those who are suffering from loneliness in many situations in lives. Could be in a rest home, in a hospice, in an orphanage, in prison. There are many people that go through the forgetfulness of society, feeling lonely, some of them depressed. We include them in our prayer. We now take a moment to pray for those who have passed away recently, whatever the cause may be, COVID or any other diseases that took some of brothers and sisters to different level, different dimension, different stage of their spiritual evolution. We pray for them, offering them this opportunity to realize where they are and the possibility of continuing life, because death is just a part of the journey. This awareness might lead them to be able to see, to perceive the spiritual friends that are with them, offering help to take them wherever they need to go. But we also pray for those that were left behind, people that are longing their loved ones, their feeling of loss. Let their hearts know as well that they will be together And they are still together in their love for one another. We also pray for the spirits that are reincarnating, being born now to be part of this family of planet Earth. Some reincarnating as trials or atonements, others as missions. Very important part of the process that we're going through of the moral evolution of the planet. We now take a moment to pray for those we know they are going through the difficult times. So let us imagine them in the screen in our minds. Our imagination is powerful, our intentions and our will multiplied by the spirits that are here. Let's imagine those friends or family, relatives of ours receiving these blessings. When sadness becomes happiness, disease becomes health, loneliness becomes joy. The superior spirits know exactly what is needed, using our good intentions and our fluids to offer them this possibility of change. We also, in this moment, we thank our spiritual friends for being here, applying these fluids that we are receiving in this moment, in this room that we are, but also in our homes, and also in the homes of those who are watching us. We also thank the spirits for applying the fluids in the water that we're about to drink. And for the opportunity to help in this stage of our meeting on radiation, as we now go to our final and closing prayer.
God our Father, Jesus our brother, spiritual friends here present, we thank you all for the opportunity of being here together for this meeting today. We thank you all as individuals for the opportunity of studying Spiritism in this incarnation. But we also thank, as human beings, for the opportunity of being all here on Earth, of still being here on Earth, evolving together, learning from each other's mistakes, being guided by Jesus. We ask that you bless those who could not be here today, in person or online, that they may receive the blessings that will come from this vibration, from this study, and that they may be present next week. We ask that you bless those whom we know that are passing through difficulties, that are passing through problems with their families, with their loved ones, or within themselves, that they may receive the benefits of this vibration and see the light in the end of the tunnel, that it is faith, that it is you, God, who is always present in all our lives, in all the moments, throughout our incarnations, throughout our existence. The certainty of your presence is inevitable. We ask that you bless those countries, those places that are going through wars, conflicts, serious trouble throughout this pandemic, that people also may perceive, may continue to have faith, continue to believe that you are everywhere, our Father, that you are present, mostly inside of us. We thank you for the opportunity of being here vibrating together, and ask that you bless us on our way home, and until we meet again here next week. Thank you,